Hello there, it's Antrice, and welcome to another episode of the Savvy Painter podcast. So before I introduce you to this week's guest, I want to give a big thank you to Trakell Art Supplies for sponsoring this podcast. And Trakell is giving you, my Savvy Painter listeners, an exclusive discount. When you go to Trakell.com to buy their brushes and panels, just enter the promotional code SAVVY20 and you will get 20% off of your first order. I have been having a lot of fun playing around with their brushes and they are really, really durable. I beat my brushes up so badly and these are standing up to even my abuses. So go to Trakell.com and stock up on your brushes and panels. The offer ends on May 4th, so you have a couple weeks to take advantage of it. Okay, here we go. Kami Mendlik is my guest today. In this episode, Kami talks about her first tentative steps towards becoming an artist and her resistance to even calling herself an artist. We talk about embracing the unknown regardless of our insecurities and doubts. Painting is a lifelong journey, and we stubbornly, sometimes irrationally, stay on this path even when we learn we'll never, ever find all the answers. Kami tells this fabulous story about finding her first mentor, Mary Pettis, and how important it was to her when she finally found a female painter that she admired to guide her. Mary agreed to help Kami after Kami proved that she was a worthy student. But Mary had just one condition, that Kami pass on what she would learn. And Kami has kept her promise to pass the torch by opening the St. Croix River School of Painting on the 16-acre property that she recently bought along the river near Stillwater, Minnesota. She has worked extremely hard through difficult circumstances, and as she will tell you, there were plenty of fears that could have stopped her. But she also had two very powerful incentives to push her through. Kami describes herself as stubborn. I'd say she is just determined and unrelenting. And I mean unrelenting in a good way. So here is Kami Mendlik. Kami, thank you so much for being on the Savvy Painter podcast.
Hi, thanks for having me.
I would love to hear about your early times as an artist. Can you sort of describe when you made the decision that you were going to pursue art as your vocation?
Yeah, it's funny. I don't remember an instant or an exact time and place. Just like many painters' story, it began at the beginning, really, where I was drawing as long as I can remember and sketching and painting. And it wasn't necessarily a decision. It's just who I was and what I was. So then it seems like the world really was kind of working against me as far as going in that direction. So I didn't ever think of it, even as a young or a teenager. I didn't really think it was going to be a career. I just thought I was an artist before I knew that I was a painter. It's just such a hard question because knowing that it couldn't be a career at the time, because the world was telling me it couldn't be, that you couldn't make a living doing this and you'd have to be broke and there's no job placement for this. And so it was just discouraging. I actually started going another route. But by the time I was 18, I was already studying classical realism on the side and thought, well, I'll just do this. And I even went to the extent of, by the time I think I was maybe 21 years old, I became a flight attendant for a year just so that I could travel and paint.
Oh, that's a great solution.
It seemed like a good idea at the time. Well, okay, so I want to travel and I want to paint, and that's what I want to do. And unfortunately, I need to make a living. So it just seemed like the perfect thing to do, which it really wasn't. So that lasted for a year when I realized that the painting wasn't happening that often. But eventually, I realized that I really was going to be a painter. I was a painter. I am a painter. And I needed to really learn the fundamentals, and I just need to be good. And I was willing to be poor to do it, at the time. So I just decided to work really hard at it. And that's when I decided I was willing to be poor to be a painter at that age.
That was a consequence, if need be, that you were willing to accept.
Mm-hmm.
Was there like kind of a turning point? Was there something that happened where you just thought, okay, it has to be painting. I can't do it in between flights or in between other jobs. Was there something that pushed you into that decision?
Well, it's funny because even now, so I'm 43 years old. I think of myself as an 18-year-old painter, and standing down. I grew up in Stillwater, Minnesota, where it's a historical town, and there's beautiful architecture. So I would stand in the street and in the park doing architectural renderings because I thought it was interesting. I didn't even know what plein air painting was at the time. I was always like to observe and study what's in front of me and try to draw it or try to paint it. So even during the time that I thought I wasn't doing it as a career or that I wasn't a painter, I still was moving in the direction that I still feel like I'm moving in now, if that makes any sense. It's only recently that I've really realized, I'm 43 now, realizing that this entire journey has been almost like an acceptance of I am a painter.
Right. Actually, that makes a lot of sense. I think that's surprisingly common.
I keep thinking I just started. So the question is like, have I still gotten that? And now I founded a school, and now I purchased a property, and now my whole life is dedicated to art. And I'm still thinking, am I a painter? Am I going to be a painter when I grow up? And so I don't know if that's ever, it's just that historically speaking now, I mean, history has in a way proven itself that, I feel more comfort in saying that, yes, I am now a painter and this is what I do because I have done it since I was 18.
Right.
And I've taken little breaks not breaks from painting because I've always painted my way through all of this. But there are so many pivotal stepping stones that have led me to today that it was just almost destiny, but almost like afraid all the time of completely saying like, yes, I am going to be a painter. It wasn't like that pivotal moment.
Right.
It's like I'm throughout the years, I'm just slowly shedding the fear.
So there's two things that I think are very interesting about what you just said. And one of them is, it is a sort of meandering path. And there are it's almost like when you're sailing and you're tacking back and forth. It's not a straight line. And I think that that's a kind of a big misunderstanding that a lot of people have, that that it's one of those shoulds that people buy into, that it should be a straight line, that I shouldn't have any doubts. I should, if I'm an artist, then I wake up every morning and can't wait to like jump into my studio and, like that the birds are singing and, landing on your shoulder while you paint. And it's never that way.
It's never that way. And I talk and I give lectures and I teach, and I always tell my students, it's not, I don't wake up. It is such a myth that people think that artists just wake up so happy and inspired. It's discipline. And most days I am not inspired to paint. I get inspired by painting. So then it takes that part of me that's discipline, like every day I go to the studio or I go to the field or I teach. And I mean, I'm pretty much every day, at least 5 days a week. Lately it's been 7, but it's woven into every piece of my life. And then that feeds me spiritually or inspires me. But I never really am just wake up just going, woohoo, I'm so inspired to paint. There's every painter, I believe. I mean, I can, most of them, I shouldn't say every, but I really think that for most of us that are successful in this, journey of painting or the art career, it's that we have discipline and we do it even when we don't feel like it. So if you wait for the inspiration, you'll never make it. You have to set yourself up and treat it. I mean, I don't want to say I treat it like a job in the way that, it's more than a job to me. It's my soul and my life. But I really can think of a million other things, excuses for not painting every day. Mm-hmm. And one of them is I just don't feel like it.
Yeah. And I think that sort of takes the, like that to me is I don't know if line is the right word, but that's sort of, that distinguishes, like a professional artist versus an amateur artist in the sense that, or anything, that you do it whether or not you feel like it, and you treat it as a priority, meaning like, maybe that's a less scary way to say it, that it's a priority as opposed to a job or work, because I know that's like when you're referring to art, nobody wants to say that, but it is like, I know exactly what you're talking about. And it is so true. You do it day in and day out, regardless of whether the lighting is perfect or like it doesn't, or whether you would just simply rather be laying on the couch. Like speaking for myself, there's plenty of days when I would prefer to just lay on the couch and binge watch something on Netflix than do anything else. But we get up and we do what we have decided is most important to us.
Right. That's the big thing here, is that it's not, I don't hear it much anymore. I think that I'm not surrounded by people that don't get it anymore as much as I used to be. But there was a decade in my younger painting life where people would say, you're so lucky and you're so talented.
Yeah.
And when I was younger, I would just either say nothing or say thank you. And now I say, well, it has nothing to do with luck. It has to do with work.
Yeah.
With hard work and really believing somewhere, even though there's always the insecurity and there's always the doubt. But in a way, it's a good balance, because that insecurity and that doubt is just humbling, which that's what painting is. I mean, it's just, as soon as you think you've got it, you're just, it's like 2 steps forward, 3 steps back. It's just, and the thing is too, I'm realizing now at 43 years old versus even 25 or 30 years old, is that I'll never get there. Like I'll never feel.
Oh yeah.
I mean, isn't that kind of interesting? It's kind of philosophical to me, but it's kind of like, wow. And I'm starting to become somewhat okay with that.
Yeah.
Like, there's enough of me that's challenging, like, what? But, I think about where I am now and how, even 5 or 10 years ago, I was just to like feed my kids and pay my bills and with ease.
Yeah.
And not fear of if it's going to work every month, that would just be like, that is what, I would have arrived. And now I'm doing that. And now it's like, I have that ease right now. And I'm aware, I know what it tastes like to not have enough money to, buy the food you need at the store. But now it's like I do. And I still have that kind of little bit of fear, like that, or awareness or reality that is possible, but I'm just less afraid of that now. But I still think there's this unknown of I don't really know where I'm going.
Yeah. Yeah. No, that's really interesting, because if we're talking about that in terms of like, cause it is very philosophical, and that applies to painting. It applies to our lives. And it's such a crazy realization. Like I remember, in my 20s and 30s, just feeling like if I just work hard enough, then I'm going to find that magic formula that all the other artists know, right. That like, know, all these, all the legends and masters, they found this golden chalice, this thing, this key, whatever. I had no idea what it was, or this something. And then I would be okay being an artist. And then I remember, I believe I was reading a book. I think it was Rothko. I'm pretty sure it was Rothko. And he made some comment like, even now in my twilight years, I still don't know what I'm doing. And I remember I was like, my first reaction was just horror. It was absolute like,
what's the point?
Yeah. It was like, this is never gonna end. And I just wanted, I kind of wanted to cry. I was just like, you've got to be kidding me. Like, I have been hanging on because of this idea that someday I would find that thing and I would be okay. And then there was that I really wanted to cry. And then there was this like, oh, All right. So that doesn't exist. That's a unicorn that I'm never going to find. So then these artists just somehow learn to embrace that. So effectively, Rothko just saved me 40 years of suffering because, like somebody told me that.
Right. It was pretty advanced, though, even for yourself to actually be able to read that and understand that. I mean, the answers are all over in books for us,
Right.
But it doesn't. It just means something different every year that we live, or experience, or wisdom. So for it to actually, the saying, the teacher appears when the student is ready to listen. It's kind of like we are the students of life and the students of painting, and the greatest feeling of like hopefully living is a full life is that you hopefully gain the wisdom that only living can, experiencing life can grace you with and teach you.
Right. Which goes back to your comment about painting. Like you can only get inspiration to paint by actually painting. You can only become confident by doing the things that you want to be confident in. There's no and I think that's a weird thing that we see people who have achieved a certain level of anything, whether it's art or financial independence or even athletic abilities, and think that they somehow have this thing that we don't have.
Right. And it comes across with such ease. It's
right.
like from the outside, physically, let's just, speaking of painting, it just looks so easy. Like physically, it looks, I don't know. I remember the younger me when I had a VHS tape, like I'd save enough money to buy a VHS of, whatever painter I remember buying one of Kevin McPherson's. I was so excited. I paint this, it's going to be great. And I stick it in. I'm like, got it. I got it. Like, I'm going to go do this now.
Oh, yeah. And Kevin makes everything look so easy. You're just like,
crazy hand and crazy brush. And then poof, appears a painting, So it's like, it's such an active brain work. And so it's kind of, it's so similar to anything, like you said, athletics or a brain surgeon, or, it doesn't really look that hard physically. But for some reason, we think that painting is just one of those things that you either just have the talent or you watch somebody and then you learn how to do it. And that is that mystery, which this is where I'm going now. It's like that mystery, that gray area of, will anyone ever figure it out? Probably not, which is actually really good. It keeps us wondering and keeps us endlessly curious. And and intellects are there, people who have devoted their life to whatever, especially like I've experienced a lot of people in the medical field or science that their brains are so curious about this thing called art,
Right.
Like I can figure this out. And they're curious, science is very like they're exploring and they're pushing and they're looking and searching, and there's a beginning foundation and formula, but then it just keeps going, so it almost makes sense that art and science are.
Oh, totally. It's like art. Yeah. It's a Mandelbrot, that it just keeps going and like it's infinite. Like no matter how much you zoom the telescope in, that pattern is just repeating itself infinitely.
It totally, which is to me really, really fascinating.
Yeah.
Keeps my brain going and my curiosity young for sure.
Yeah. And then it's like, when you think about it, each artist is sort of working on their own little piece of that, like each artist seems, we're all fascinated by something just slightly different that will keep us occupied for years, if not decades.
Well, and don't you think that's the difference? So the people that are, the young painters, and I don't think age in painting is in digits, like of your age. Mm-hmm. I just think that, like you're a toddler if you just started, 5 years ago or something like that. I think you're young painters, not meaning 18-year-olds, but are looking for that fast way of getting. I don't even know if they always use the word authentic, but maybe they use the word style. I'm looking
their voice
or their style, and they're looking so hard and trying to pick up mannerisms or, studying other painters' brush strokes or their technique quote, that kind of thing. And I attempt to explain that you don't need to look for that, that you already have that. You were born with that.
Right.
And it's in you. You just need to really do the hard work. It's just that we want to jump. Humans are inherently lazy. We just want that thing now. We want immediate growth or immediate satisfaction without having to put the laborious efforts forth in the fundamentals.
Yeah. Well, I think it's more, I don't know. I'm curious if it's that or if it's more, I honestly don't know the answer to this. This isn't me just going, I think it's this. I really don't know. Like sometimes I think it's that, like that we are sort of inherently lazy, or you might call it efficient, right? That we don't want to spend time on something that we don't need to spend time on.
Right.
And sometimes it is flat out laziness, but I think oftentimes it's almost like like maybe speaking for myself, that, when I look back on those early years when, like I was, I feel like in college, I went to art school, but I think that my whole 4 years of college and then 4 years after, I was pretty much like an embryo, not even an infant in the art world. And you just want to, there's like a little bit of insecurity in that, because we feel like, for example, if you look at it, like I spent 4 years in college, and then supposedly, like most other professions, you graduate from college and you should know enough of what you need to know in order to quote unquote make it in that field, which is the whole point of college, right? But with art, you're just like this little bitty baby embryo, but you have these high expectations of where you should be.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And so I think it's like kind of this feeling that we somehow missed something that everybody else got. And you're trying to figure out why everybody else seems to get it and you didn't. So you're looking for some sort of a formula or some sort of, like you said, like a way to leap past that, because that stage, according to the expectations, that stage that really does take 5 to 10 years in our heads should really only take maybe 5 or 6 months. Like, why am I so slow?
Right. And you think you can just go learn the formula,
right?
And know how to do it. And that's an interesting perspective, because I didn't get a BFA and I didn't go to a traditional college.
Uh-huh.
And so I didn't have that. I didn't have the expectations of what you were just explaining,
mm-hmm.
which is interesting perspective, especially that my daughter is a freshman in her first year of art school. Yeah. She said she wanted to go to MCAD, and I said no. And hands on her hips, and she's like, "You can't stop me. That's what I'm doing."
Why did you say no?
I don't know. It was a knee-jerk reaction. Like, do you know how hard this is? You can't be doing this.
That's so funny that like parents want.
I shook my head and looked in the mirror and went, "What happened to you?" I was like Jim Carrey, like, who is this person talking? So that took me she looked at me like, "You can't tell me that. Look at you. You did it. You're doing great."
Right.
So it is interesting when it's the thing in the world that you love more than yourself or anything else tells you they want to walk through the fire. Right. Ouch. But somebody told me when I was younger, that you can't stop an artist, so try.
Obviously.
Yeah. So it's like, and it's true though. I mean, if an artist decides not to do something because somebody said you can't, you kind of think, well, you're going to have a lot of doors shut on you forever as a painter, an art painter. So you have to kind of have that internal burn to kind of out through and not always listen to those voices, even though they linger, linger. They sit on your shoulders sometimes and creep in.
And we have this just completely irrational stubbornness inside of me, because I think I used to I was always very much a rule follower when I was a kid and stuff. You see, if somebody said no, I wouldn't question it. I would just be like, oh, okay. And then, you commit to being an artist or whatever. And so pretty much now, maybe it's with age, maybe it's also, I'm sure it's a combination of everything, that age and being an artist and having that sort of inherent, if you're an artist, you sort of inherently are an entrepreneur. But I pretty much now, when somebody says no, the thought that goes through my head is pretty much the equivalent of, no, you can't go through this door. And I immediately am looking for another entrance. Like, it's like, oh, okay. All right.
Or like, girls can't do that. Only boys can. I'm like, what? You know,
Right.
the same kind of thing. But I know that's how I was too. Or if somebody has ever told me that I can't do something, it's just like, I'll show you I can do it better.
This episode is sponsored by Trakell Art Supplies. Trakell Art Supplies makes custom panels from their factory right here in California. High-quality panels are made to order and shipped directly to your home or studio. Choose from lightweight gator foam panels, birchwood panels, or aluminum. Here's Pro Team artist Sean Cheatham talking about Trakell panels.
The first time I used just their straight wood panels that were gessoed, but what I've been really liking is their linen, oil-primed linen on either dye bond or gator board. The ones on gator board are so light, which I love. I brought a bunch with me to Rome, and I don't love painting on linen anymore. I think it's beautiful and fancy and all that stuff, but I like smooth panels, but those linen panels with the oil grounds I was very impressed with, and I think actually ended up being some of my favorite paintings consistently that I did in Rome when I was maybe only doing 1 in 4 on those panels. But I love how light they are, and I think the glue that's removable anyway, so you just get the linen if you want to remove it later. But for traveling, it's amazing. They're so light.
And don't forget, Trakell is offering you a very special deal right now on those linen panels and anything else you fancy on Trakell.com. When you use the promo code SAVVY20 at checkout, you get 20% off of your next order. That's such a great deal. I would totally stock up now if I were you. So act now, because this offer ends on May 4th. So we've just started talking, so you don't know the story, but I worked for Disney and for a long time. But I don't think I've ever talked about this on the podcast, but basically the reason that I got the job at Disney effectively was because I was dating, I had just graduated from college and I was dating a guy, and I said, and I didn't even particularly at that moment, I didn't care if I worked for Disney or not. I just knew I needed a job. And so I said, I'm going to go work for Disney. And he laughed at me and said, you're never going to get into Disney. You can't do that right when you graduate from college. And then it was on. I specifically remember that switch getting flipped, and I was like, I will, like, it was just like an undeniable, like, there was no possible way that anyone was going to talk me out of it. I would do what I had to do to get that job because somebody said, you can't do that. And I was like, watch me. And I did it.
I'm interested in what you're capable of when you're determined. So determination goes a long ways, doesn't it?
Yeah. And when I look back now, I'm like, oh my God, like, you know, like I think I used to joke that they hired me just to like shut me up and get me to stop calling them. And, you know, like they were just sick of hearing from me. So it's really funny. Like, yeah, that determination that there was no way I was going to take no for an answer. And if I wasn't qualified, then I was going to do what I needed to do to be qualified, and they were going to hire me, period. End of story. It was just a matter of time.
Yep. That's congratulations.
But it's like, that's, you know, what you're talking about. Like when you're an artist, you kind of have to be that irrational about it.
I agree. And I've had things similar. I do not work for Disney, but there is incidents that are similar that people have told me that have just been the fuel that I needed to push me forward, you know, and that's something that I kind of remember being, you know, that was just in me when I was little, even just that challenge. Like if someone told me, if my cousins who were boys said, you can't do that, you're a girl, you know, then I would work extra hard to do it better than they did. You know?
Totally.
Or when I first met my first mentor, Mary Pettis, I think I was 18. And I saw her work and met her at the Hyatt Regency, and she was doing wildlife art, and she had prints. And I thought, well, not wildlife, but I saw that she was a woman painting, and there were not that I could see around me in the Minneapolis area, many women at those shows. So I thought, well, and she's not that far from me. She's down the river in 28 miles, just down the St. Croix. And I thought I could drive to her. So throughout the course of me bothering her and her not really, receptive at first.
Oh, really?
Well, I think she was starting, she had an atelier and she's busy with her life. And, at the time, I think she was, I hate to say the facts for sure, but kind of met her now husband many years, but Randy, but she was starting a new chapter in her life. And here I'm this young painter and I just latched onto her. And I remember knocking at her door and, can you help me? I am really trying to figure out how to paint a tree and it's not working. And one time she said to me, this was the first few years I knew her, she said, well, go paint it 100 times and then come back and then ask me that question. So she probably thought that would weed me away. That would get rid of me.
Well, at least if you come back with 100 paintings of a tree, like she suggested, then she knows for sure you are serious and you're not wasting her time.
I did. So she just was knocking on her door. Hi. Okay. So I still have one question. And
what was her reaction? Did you show up with so you did 100 paintings? Did you bring them? Describe that moment. Like what happened?
A box. Yeah. Like a box of paintings. Yeah. She'll laugh when she hears this. She'll go, oh, that's right. And then I don't remember what my question was because I don't even know if I knew enough to ask a question, but I came back and I just remember her saying, okay, I will pass this on to you, but you have to pass this on. That's the way this works. It's the circle. Uh-huh. So I'm like, okay, I will do anything, whatever you say, 1,000 times. So she was my first, mentor. And then the interesting thing, now that I look back, so she was in the process of getting married and, moving to, a house up in Angel Hill and kind of an exciting time in her life. And she had this atelier and there's one other woman left in there. Her name was Marcy and an older lady. And her and I were working on the site size method. So I was studying classical realism, but Mary would just kind of, I think she was there on Monday nights for a year or two. And I just can't remember exactly the times. And then she got busy and had the space still and just said, she gave us keys. Marcy and I were the only ones that didn't disappear. She just said, you can come work here, not work, but paint, and we did. And Marcy and I were there every single day. I drove 28 miles each way and just stayed there every day and painted.
What a great opportunity, though. She basically handed you the keys to her studio and said, you can use it.
Yeah.
Dream come true.
Yeah. She was excited, for the first time just to have, she just was changing her life and, with a new happy marriage and all of that. So she took a little break from painting for a while and I was starting and.
How exciting.
Yeah. In that time I got married. I was young and then I was pregnant with my daughter and I was still painting and I was working on a site size method piece that I had been working on 8 months every day. And I crystal cut glass vase. And I remember just trying to put my seatbelt on over my belly at 9 months pregnant, trying to I have to finish this painting before I have this baby. So it's driving there going, I could barely, get my stomach behind the steering wheel. And so I remember crying to her and I wanted to have my child, and now she's a wonderful woman who's 18, but I was driving and I got to Mary's and we went painting out by the river one night when I was very pregnant. It was very hot, humid summer. And I just said, I'm finally getting this. I was 24. I'm finally getting this. And now I'm not going to be able to paint, and what am I going to do? And she said, well, you can paint with your eyes. And she said, you'll learn more. You're ready just to paint with your eyes for a while. And sure enough, so I remember that every day, even holding a new infant and painting with my eyes and studying and really learning how to see. Yeah. And I was told by another older wisdom woman at the time that 98% of painting is learning to see the truth, which
yes,
was so true. So I just remember that. And I then picked up the brush, I don't know, Paige was probably a year, and I painted better than I had ever painted in my life.
That's so cool. That's so interesting and so cool. Because number one, that I think is a huge fear among women. And I get this question a lot is what do I, like, how do I paint with kids? And am I like, can I be a mom and still paint? And I don't have like actual statistics or numbers, but of all the artists that I've interviewed, probably almost half of them are women. And I'd say most of those women have children.
Right. Well, and I teach, and I teach a lot, and I think 8 out of 10 of my students are women. I don't know if that's partially because I'm a woman or just that's who's doing that. But a lot of people have put it off because of having, because of having children and the difficulties of, trying to fit everything in. Mm-hmm. But then I get young people, and, I was starting my art career, and really I was actually already making a living as an artist, as much as whatever you would want to call making a living. It was my job. I was selling paintings since I was 19, but I wasn't making much. I was waitressing at night, and I had a little art studio / gallery in Stillwater, really young, just out of complete naiveness and not thinking that it mattered. I was waitressing at night and going to my studio / gallery / whatever you want to call it during the day, mm-hmm. and studying with Mary Pettis, but she really wasn't there. But she was the one that was believing in me. So that was like, gave me all the fuel that I needed. But, then I had kids, and then 22 months later I had my son, and wasn't really in a very supportive marriage. And, that marriage didn't last that much longer. And I ended up raising my children myself when they were really little until today. And, I had no money. Mm-hmm. But I also had, at some point, so I have these children, and I am still married at this time when they're babies. And I knew that I needed to really study hard. Mm-hmm. Mary would just give me enough. It wasn't that I was taking classes from her, because I wasn't. And even fundamentally, she didn't really teach me fundamentally, mm-hmm. but she would kind of give me directions, try this, or go here, or paint 100, or, there's a Pashad challenge that we're doing. I said, well, what's a Pashad challenge? And this is when internet was new.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I remember getting an AOL account, and I bought a computer just so I could do this. And she had this group, and there were 6 accomplished artists, and then young me that they just kind of let in, just
right. Mary's like, look, I told her to go paint 100 trees, and she actually did it. So you guys got to let her in.
Shad group. Okay. So they met in Hawaii, and this group decided to have a Pashad challenge, and they let me in, and we would check in on Mondays, and it was an enormous deal for me to take a picture and then email the picture of my paintings from the week to this group. It took me now it's so easy. That's why it's everything is still exciting, like the iPhone. My kids say you don't need to call it an iPhone, Mom, anymore. It's just a phone. But so I did that, and then we would check in on Mondays, and everybody that was in the group had to put $40 in. Mm-hmm. And whoever at the end of 3 months painted the most, and you were supposed to paint a painting a day, but I did more, and it was supposed to be 60 minutes a painting.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, with an egg timer, so that you would really time yourself. And, you could either work from life or work from studying, like copying a master. Like I copied a lot of Levitan's, just, really try to understand how he handled, values and structure. And so at the end of the 3 months, whoever had the most would get all the money to buy art books. And I'm like, I am going to win. Because that seemed like good money to me. So I did it, and I won, and I got I started my art book collection with that money.
That's a great story. I love it.
So then it got me, so I would do things, my kids were babies, but old enough to run around in their diapers saying, "Brush us down, mama." So I would set the egg timer with babies, and I would do my studying, and they grew up like that. They grew up knowing that the egg timer is going, and when they'd hear the egg timer go off, they'd come ripping down the stairs and brush.
Oh my God.
So then I kind of became somewhat of an advocate, or, a role model in a way, or I'd start talking about finding time to paint, because we have all of these excuses why we can't, and we're so busy. And
it's huge. That is such a huge topic. I get asked that question.
Yeah.
So much. So I love this. Okay, go on.
Well, and I think consistency in doing it. And I think that if we're thinking that we need to produce something exceptional, and it actually stops us from even just painting. Mm-hmm. So much of the battle is just stepping up to the canvas. And
mm-hmm.
and it's just something about the fear. And I said it earlier in the talk about humans are inherently lazy. And I don't know if that comes with fear, or, and maybe that's just a statement. That's not like it's a fact. But I've worked with so many people who will just not do it because they think they don't have time, and what's the point if it's an hour? And now there's a ton of evidence and very wonderful examples of people who are painting limited amount of time. And this is before I knew anything about painting a day, or the painters that are doing that. And also there's balance. There's times when you need to paint longer, of course, but just getting there and painting. And then also I went through a pretty awful divorce, and I had little kids, and it was bad enough that I just started losing my fear, because I had been so scared that at some point I just thought, I'm doing this. If I have to, what is the worst that can happen? Because we're afraid of like losing our house. Or I'm like, if I have my babies and I can feed them, if I am sane, if my brain is sane, I can figure out a way to do this. I can.
Yes. Yes. Yeah. You're not going to, I don't know, I think it's a weird thing. We have these irrational fears,
right?
That we're going to end up living underneath a freeway. And,
yes, we do.
Yeah. And I remember having that fear. And then all of a sudden, I just started testing these fears out, right? Really questioning it. Okay, so what is the worst that would happen? And what would I do if that did happen? So just sort of playing out these, I kind of call it play out the disaster scenarios. There is no way I could ever, short of mental illness, there's no way I'm going to end up living under a freeway like that, that major fear. I have too many resources just within myself. And then on top of that, I have an enormous safety net around me that, if I would not like it, I would do everything I could to absolutely avoid it. But if everything came crashing down and I had to go to my 80-year-old mother and say, please, can I have some time? Just to get back up.
Right.
It's there.
Yeah. And I came to that too, because I was so afraid of, well, you can't do that because at that time I was in that world of that young kind of suburban, everybody is leasing a vehicle, and I had a mortgage, and I ended up with the house with the mortgage, and I thought, well, I can't do this so you have a lot of I can't,
mm-hmm.
because I might lose this house, and where were the kids and I live, and you have this thing you're going to jump right from a mortgage in a nice suburban area to the street.
Yeah.
There's apartments, there's low income apartments. And, and at 19, I was willing to be broke. And here I have two really good reasons to work hard.
Yeah.
And their faces are looking right at me, and I'm going to do that. So that was sometimes I think part of the reason I'm sitting where I'm sitting is because of need, and because I let go of fear. Almost. You always get in there a little bit, but then I just started realizing okay. And then there would be times that I would be so low and thinking, what am I doing? Why am I doing this? What? So then I would just be almost depressed. And I just would think, what am I doing? Nothing's happening. I'm just painting every day. And then I would go out to a field in the middle of nowhere with my kids with butterfly nets, and someone would pull up ran totally out of the blue and say, do you sell those?
Right.
And it would be like, yes, I do. Be like, how much are they? And I'm thinking, how much do I need for this $550? That would be great. I would love it. Like, wow. And then that would be enough fuel for me to just like affirmation, like,
yeah.
Oh, thank you, God. This is what's the next thing, like,
yeah.
It's the answer of keep going in a way. But it only would happen, like the good things would only happen when I would paint.
Yes.
It was just like,
you have to be there working.
It wouldn't happen when I was doing nothing. Idle motion was just nothing was happening,
Yes. Oh my gosh, that's so true. I love it. And it's so easy to forget too. And most of the, like, I don't know about you, and it's so different because you had 2 little babies that would definitely, like, if that doesn't inspire you to push yourself outside of your comfort zone, I'm not sure what will. But
right.
Like for me, it was always like when I really got brutally honest with what was going on and what I was actually afraid of, the embarrassing thing is that the things that I was allowing me to stop me or to prevent me from doing what I really wanted to do or what I felt was my calling was effectively, if you're really just brutal about it, it was my own ego.
Yeah.
It was something about, I don't want to be embarrassed, or what if I fail, or, but all of that, you can lump that into, it's my own ego. I don't want to look bad, or I don't want to try something and not be able to make it.
Yeah.
Or somebody's going to say no.
I know. And even ego, the other side of ego is fear, or the base of it is, so even that is, to me, my ego grows out of fear, when I have that. It's like, maybe I just won't show it. And anytime I have a show still, it doesn't look like it, but I'm scared. I feel like I'm hanging naked on the wall. And then it's not really that, it's so great to criticize, It's like, who doesn't go to the shows and go, oh, that's a little dark in that shadow or that, I've done that. So, it's happening, but we just have to hang on the wall naked and pretend that we're dressed, I guess.
Yeah. Well, that's where, like, I love the man in the arena, that really it's the people who are in who are in there working and fighting, who have the, like, if you're not in there doing the work, then I don't really want to hear your critiques. Like, it's pretty much like, if you're not like in there getting dirty and getting bloody or whatever it is in pursuit of the thing that matters, most to you as a vocation, then there's not a lot that you can say that is going to have a lot of meaning to me.
No, I agree with you. I do agree with you. And the other thing is, like, even where people are, so there's that whole topic of, when are you ready to get out there? I hear that a lot from people. Mm-hmm. I was told, by one of my instructors that I was like not ready or half baked, or, you can't get out there. Mm-hmm. And there is something to not just going out there to sell your work, like that shouldn't be the motivating factor for being an artist, definitely. Right. Mm-hmm. But then there's also the place where I come to that I find all stages of people's work very interesting. Mm-hmm. I find it interesting, especially young artists, there is just such a rawness and an innocence to a young painter, that it's like, I don't know, it's so authentic in a way, the trying so hard, even the trying so hard is so authentic to me.
And I think a lot of that comes from your ability to empathize with them. Like, what that's like.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. And I think you can't really hide, the other thing, this is just totally off on a tangent, but it made me think of this. I remember I think it was before I even had Paige. So I was in one of my first big shows with a bunch of other painters, and I had 2 quote plein air paintings in there that I had done. And this lady comes up to me. It was over in Minnetonka, which is, in the Twin Cities, a nice area of the Twin Cities. And they have this beautiful art center. And this lady walks up to me and says, "Are those your paintings?" And I was scared kind of. And I said, yep, they are. And she said, I'll be watching you. And her finger seeming like it was like 18 inches long, like pointing at me. Her
right.
Like, wow. And the paintings were fine. I mean, it's not those paintings that I look back and go, what was I thinking for hanging those up? But they weren't anywhere where I am now,
Right.
But they were hanging in the museum or in the art center. And a lady came up to me, and sure enough, for almost every year after that, whenever I had a show, she'd show up.
Huh.
And I was in my early 20s. And then I remember specifically a show that I had in Marine on the St. Croix, and she came, and so she would show up, and she said, I don't know if you remember me. And she told me her name, but I won't say it on, this. But, and she said, and I said, yeah, I remember you. And she said, I'm following you.
I love it.
Finally, like 15 years of following me, she started buying paintings, because she'd always just come in, and she would never come in during the actual like artist reception with all the people. She'd come in privately and day after or the day before or something, and just be there for an hour looking at the paintings. And then one day she bought a painting, and then she started bringing friends, and then they started buying paintings. And she knew what she was seeing in a young artist. She knew, even though I wasn't ready for her to collect.
Right.
So with this story, what I'm getting at is that I don't think you wait until you've, quote, arrived, always, because that is something that I hear from people, like,
yes,
am I ready? And we're never ready. Of course you need to not just the goal shouldn't be to be in a show and to paint. You should be painting because you can't not, that's what I believe, but you're never going to be totally there. And I don't know if it's up to anyone else, unless it's someone you ask to say, you're not ready.
I agree. Because
that's said, that's said a lot. That's just given out there without being asked,
Yeah, especially now.
People will just give their opinions. And I think sometimes those opinions are just none of their business. It's like, does that make sense? Or does
no, that totally makes sense, because you're not, it actually goes back to what we were talking about before, where that whole concept of, are you ever done?
Right.
And so are you ever ready is a part of that same question.
Mm-hmm.
It's a part of that same philosophy, I guess, that presumably, at any given moment, if we're honest and authentic about what we're doing, at any given moment, we are doing the worst painting that we will ever do again. You can think about that.
Well, right. Because why would we paint tomorrow if the best painting we were doing right now? How depressing.
Yeah. And also we're learning and we're evolving and we're getting new information and we're getting new stimulus and we're being exposed to new things. So you should be always growing. So, maybe worst isn't like the most gracious word I could use, but your future paintings, if you are painting authentically and if you are really putting your heart and soul into it, will be more informed and more technical, or more, or more of your own voice in it. And you as an artist are continually growing. So at any particular, like if you wait for that painting,
right,
you're never going to get there.
Get there. That's a good thing. Like I tell my classes, guess what, guys, you are never going to get there. And some of them have this face.
Like mine, like when I wanted to cry.
Yeah. Like, what? I'm never going to get there. What am I doing paying you for a class then?
Exactly.
And then they keep coming back for more.
Yes, we do. We all do. And I wouldn't have it any other way.
It's interesting though. And it's just, and every time I write or I talk about something that I really am sure about right now, I say, right now, this is what I think.
Yes.
I'm learning enough that this is what I think right now. And I know that it'll change and develop tomorrow and next year. And, it's just, being that balance, right? That whole dance between passion and intellect never change, never stops.
No, but that's kind of what I love about it.
I know, I think that's what makes this breed
yeah. we are unique people in that sense. Like those people that have that tendency that I think I would call it an insatiable curiosity and appetite for learning.
Right. Mm-hmm. Yeah. That curiosity. It's like going back to the same place to paint over and over again, which I remember when I was, again, in my 20s, I was really painting the St. Croix a lot because it's very close to my home. And I would bring my kids for like 3 hours in the morning to something called Mom's Day Out. And it was just like the most incredible 3 hours of my day because I had a little bit of time. I'd be all packed up and I'd have my stuff in there so that I could utilize every second. And I'd run down to the river and I would do my paintings and then I would set my timer. And then I had an egg timer that I would bring with me because I didn't have a phone.
Uh-huh.
Like now you could just set your phone.
Right.
So I would let myself go into the zone totally and set an egg timer. So I'd remember to go pick up my kids.
Oh my God. I would probably totally forget them.
Seriously. Oh gosh. Yeah. I can remember like the color of the temperature of the waves and the planes as they roll over, but I would forget every single, teacher conference or PTA meeting or anything like that.
It's so funny. And I love so much that image of your kids hearing the timer and screaming brushes down and running, because it's like, what I love about that is that they're sort of involved in it and they get it. Like, while that is happening, mommy's busy, but she's there for me the second that ends. And it kind of reminds me of like just all these little ways that different artists have incorporated their children into their painting practice. I love hearing those stories. It's so cool. And I think like a lot of people will really enjoy that too.
Well, I think even now I have this, so now 3 years ago, I bought 16 acres where I have this little 160-year-old farmhouse. And then I have a barn, which is, in our yard. And that's where my studio is. And,
mm-hmm.
and my daughter's off to college and my son is 16 and he gets home from school, and every time he gets home from school, he walks up to the studio, and he's a boy, he's not as talkative as my daughter, and he's quieter, but he'll come up and see if there's any chocolate from a class, and he'll get a glass of water and sit there look on his phone. It's real. We're keeping it real, but he just comes up, and it's just part of me painting. It's comfort almost to them.
Yeah.
Because that is what's normal to them.
Yeah.
And we use for the school, people come in on Mondays and Thursdays when there's classes. My kids have just known that we have people around us. We have painters around us, and it's normal to them.
Yeah.
So they'll come in and use the bathroom in the house, and pretty normal to them, but it is comfort. And it's just a way that it's been integrated into their world that does not seem abnormal.
Yeah.
And the other thing that I hear from people is that they have so many obligations or they feel guilty.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And I think that guilt is really self-induced.
Usually.
I really do. Usually I've had it, other forms of it too happen to me, but a lot of it is the excuse of not being able to is just that we don't communicate well with our people.
Yes.
Even in the unhealthiest of relationships I've had, if I just say, I am going to be, how's your week looking? I'm going to be, I need to paint this day, this day, this day. And if you just kind of communicate, it happens so much better. And then the guilt is lifted because you're painting and you're taking care of the rest of your life. It's just,
yes.
And it's really the balance thing is.
Yeah. It's so huge. Like if your family's not taken care of, you can't concentrate in the studio. And if your painting life isn't honored, then when you're with your family, you're not really there. So both of the, we have to accept that there is not just one thing in our lives, and we have to make room for that and make sure that we give each the attention that it needs so that when we're doing the other thing, we can enjoy it. If you decide you're going to take a weekend off and just be with your kids, you can enjoy that every moment of it without worrying about like the fact that you're not in the studio, or vice versa. When you're in the studio, you can focus only on your painting and know that your kids are taken care of, your families, your family is like, obviously all their basic needs are met, but they also know that, you know, like you are there for them, you spend time with them, but right now is when you paint, and you can do that without guilt.
Yes. And that is it, because I mean, I've gone through, I'm sure a lot of painters feel this way, that, you know, there's all these pieces of our lives. And personally, I don't want to just be a painter. I mean, I love my kids. I love my relationship. I love, you know, I love walking. I love, you know, other things. And it's all my art, you know, like my life is art, but painting is my craft and it's my language, and I need to do it to be healthy, I think. But if I'm doing only one and I didn't communicate well with my time and carve it out and let everybody in my life that I love know, you know, that here's my schedule pretty much, you know, and then there's the times that they just disappear and you have free time. Well, then do what you want. But if I don't carve it out and talk to them about it, then it's kind of it's my fault when I get lazy about that that I feel guilty when I'm with them not painting, or I feel guilty when I'm painting not with them. So there's that, like, when the world's all perfect, I've kind of had a plan a little bit. You know, and plans can change, and we know that too with life. But.
Yeah, for sure. Well, Kami, it has been such fun to talk to you. Such a pleasure to have this conversation. Thank you so much for taking the time out of your schedule to talk with me.
Thank you. Yeah, this is good. I appreciate it. I know I almost forgot that we were I just was feeling like we were just having coffee talking.
I love it. That's the best thing you could say to me.
Like, all right.
Well, I hope you enjoyed that conversation as much as I did. A big, huge thank you to Kami for sharing so much of herself in this episode. That was such a powerful conversation. And I also want to give a big thank you to Megan Schmidt for connecting us. Thank you so much, Megan. I absolutely love that. You were right. Go to savvypainter.com to see the show notes of this episode. Just click on the podcast link and you will see Kami's episode right there. You will also find links to all the artists that we talked about and see examples of Kami's work. One more thing I want to let you know. This year, you can expect a lot more workshops from Savvy Painter. If you are an artist who struggles with getting painting time in, or feels like you're always busy but never really moving forward with your art, then my workshops just might interest you. Past workshops include Mindset Mastery, a 5-week online workshop to help you get past the roadblocks that keep you from painting. In it, we tackle the inner critic, fears of artists, and setting yourself up for a successful creative day. The workshop, How to Develop a Relationship with the Right Gallery, helped several artists find the right gallery and show their work. So if this is something that interests you, you can go to savvypainter.com/workshop and get on the email list. This is separate from the main list that tells you when a new episode comes out. This is just for the workshop, so you don't get quite as many emails, but when you do, there's always something really good happening. Sign up now and get a downloadable PDF with case studies that tell you exactly how 3 artists pushed through barriers that were getting in the way of their studio time. You can, for example, learn how Rhonda went from not wanting to call herself an artist to getting her very first solo show. Also, listen to an introverted artist describe how she built her confidence and then spoke in front of an audience of her peers. And you can discover the tools that Samantha used to take back her power after a decade of believing that she had no, I'm putting air quotes there, she had no talent. So again, go to savvypainter.com/workshop to reserve your place on the list. When you sign up, you get that downloadable case studies that I mentioned, but more importantly, you get exclusive invites to upcoming workshops. Most of the time when I launch a new program, it sells out before I ever announce it publicly. So reserve your spot now at savvypainter.com/workshop. Until next week, this is Antrese Wood with the Savvy Painter Podcast. Thank you so much for listening.